So the answer written down here is actually wrong. That's right, it's a wrong answer and it may look correct on the surface level, and that's what the purpose of this video is about. We're basically going to be going through these questions, and each time there's going to be a wrong answer, and you guys are going to become the examiner today, and you're going to tell me why this answer is wrong. So let's go through this one. A toy bird of mass 400 grams is lifted from the floor onto a shelf 2 meters above the ground. Okay, calculate the gravitational potential energy gained by the bird, and it's given us G of 9.8 newtons per kilo. And the students written down here, it seems to be sensible, right? Okay, they're using this equation E equals mgh, where E is the gravitational potential energy. They've written that down, and then gone ahead and done the calculation, and it looks like they substituted it all correctly. 400, that's the mass. 9.8, that's the gravitational field strength, and 2.0 meters is your height, right? So what's wrong with this? Our final answer is 7,480 joules. Well, the problem here, of course, and hopefully you guys have spotted this, is this unit over here, where the student has subbed in 400 grams, and we should know that when we use this mgh equation, the m has to be in kilograms. Okay, so the standard unit for m is going to be kilograms, and basically if you use the standard units all the way through, then you should get the standard unit out in terms of energy, which is joules. Okay, so if you actually wanted to do this correctly, what you'd have to do is sub in 0.4, and the other numbers are fine, right? 9.8, that's the one given to you, and 2 meters is fine. And if you put that into your calculator, you should find that you should get an answer about 1,000 times smaller, right? So 7.84 joules. And actually we've got the corrected answers down here. So if you look at the mark scheme over here, so this sheet, guys, if you want to get hold of this sheet, there'll be a link in the description for sheets exactly like this with a lot more questions for all the topics. Okay, so it tells us the mistake here. The mistake was we used mass in grams. The unit we should have used, like we said, is kilograms, so it's 1,000 times too large, and the correct answer is there, 7.84 joules. And it's also given us this idea of a grade 9 plus answer. I'm not going to spend too long on this, but it gives the answer in lots of detail and written very formally as well, if you guys are interested in that. Okay, so hopefully it makes sense, and let's go on to the next one. All right, we've done the first questions. Nothing's going to get past you guys now. We're on to question 2, and everyone is going to be able to spot the mistake here, right? Question 2, a resistor of resistance 5 ohms carries a current of 3 amps. Calculate the power dissipated by the resistor. Okay, so again, it's just a substitution question, right? We're working out electrical power this time, and let's see the student's answer over here. Using the power equation, P equals I times R, 3 times 5 equals 15 watts. Okay, so what's wrong with this? What's the mistake that the student has made here? Okay, so hopefully we're all aware of the power equations. Now, power can come in lots of different forms, and you can work it out with lots of different equations. Now, the most common one that you might come across is P equals IV. What you notice over here is we don't have V, right? We have I, which is current, and we want to work out power, but we don't have V, right? So this equation, probably not the one we want to use. Instead, we want to use one of the rearranged equations where we sub in V equals IR into this equation to basically give us a different form. So instead of writing P equals I times V, we could write P equals V squared over R. And that is also not very helpful to us, because again, we still have V in this equation, which we don't want. So we want an equation in terms of I and R, and hopefully you guys are all familiar with the equation P equals I squared multiplied by R. Okay, so if we are familiar with that, then we should be able to sub in for I and R. And so at this point, hopefully it's pretty clear what the student has done wrong. They have forgotten to square the I. Okay, so they just did P equals I multiplied by R, which is not quite correct. And so all you have to remember is you need to square this current. Okay, so this is a very common exam mistake that a lot of students make. You rush into things, you don't check the equation properly, or you might even write down P equals I squared R, but when it comes down to actually doing it, you don't actually square the I. Okay, so if we were to square the current over here, we should get 3 squared, which is going to be 9, multiplied by our 5 ohms. And this time it's not a unit. It's not a unit mistake, right? All the units are fine. We got it in amps, we got it in ohms, standard units, and so we should get our answer out in standard units of watts. So 9 multiplied by 5 is going to be 45 watts. And so let's go ahead and check the mark scheme. Is that what they wanted? And so, yeah, we can see the mark scheme. It tells us exactly the mistake was P equals I squared R. The reason why it loses marks, obviously, you didn't square it. You should have squared it, and instead you just used P equals I multiplied by R. And the correct answer is 45 watts. And again, we've got a very detailed explanation. I'm using all the correct terminology here. If you were to ever write this in your exam, you would definitely get all the marks, and you'd probably get, well, the examiner might not even know all the stuff that you've written down here. Okay, so definitely correct. And let's go to the next one. Okay, question 3 is we're looking at half-lives. Now, half-lives are questions and topics that students get wrong a lot. So this one, let's have a go. So we've got define the term half-life or a radioactive isotope. So it's a definition question. It's actually one of those ones where if you were to memorize this definition, then you would obviously always get all the marks correct if you memorize exactly what they want from the mark scheme. So after this video, you guys should be able to get this question right 100% of the time if it does come up. So let's look at the student's definition. Half-life is the time taken for half of the atoms in a radioactive sample to disappear completely. Okay, so this is not a calculation question, so it's more of a conceptual one. What's the mistake that the students made here with their answer? Any ideas, guys? You, my friend, are absolutely correct. You've smashed it out the park. Half-life is not the time taken for half the atoms in a radioactive sample to disappear completely. In a radioactive sample, when they undergo radioactive decay, the atoms don't disappear, right? What actually happens to them is, let's say you have, let's just call it element X, okay? And it's got a mass number of 250, and I've just made this up, okay? And let's say this decays. When it decays to, let's say, element Y with a mass number of 246, okay? So keen-eyed amongst you might actually be able to tell me what type of radioactive decay this has undergone, but we won't go into detail. That's fine. The idea is, this element X, when it decayed, it didn't just disappear, it actually became element Y, okay? So that's the key mistake the students made here, is that they've said half of the atoms are going to completely disappear. That doesn't actually happen. It's half of the nuclei, actually, not even the atoms, okay? So this should actually be the nuclei to be even more accurate. And they don't disappear completely, they decay, okay? So we can even cross that out as well. And the idea is they should decay. Apart from that, the answer is fine and would definitely be worth the 2 marks, okay? So half is the time taken is definitely correct. A lot of students make that mistake as well, where they don't say it's the time taken, they just say, oh, half of it decays. Well, what about it? It's the time taken for half of it to decay, and particularly half of the nuclei did decay, and they decay into a more stable isotope, okay? And so let's see the mark scheme. What did they want for that one? Yep, so question 3, half-life definition. So stating that the atoms disappear completely during radioactive decay, that's the mistake. Why does it lose marks? Well, the atoms don't disappear, they transform, right? Exactly as we said. And a half-life is specifically defined in terms of undecayed nuclei, okay? So not the atoms. So again, make sure you mention nuclei to make sure you get all the marks, okay? The correct answer then, half-life is the time taken for half of the undecayed nuclei in a radioactive sample to decay, or equivalently, the time for the activity of the source to half. Okay, so really an important point here. You could also mention it in terms of activity, and in a question where if they ask for a definition, either of those is fine, right? Activity or number of nuclei. But in a question, they could phrase it in a way in terms of activity or in terms of nuclei, and you need to be familiar with both. So hopefully that makes sense. And there is the grade 9+ answer for you guys that are interested. And again, if you ever wrote anything close to that, you would definitely get the marks, definitely above GCSE, but you definitely get all the marks if you were to know that. Okay, the last question that we'll do in the video then. A block of ice is heated at its melting point until it fully melts into water. The temperature remains constant throughout. Explain in terms of particles what happens to the energy supplied during melting. And what has the student written down? Well, when the ice melts, the energy supplied causes the particles to move faster, increasing their kinetic energy, which is why the particles are able to break free from each other and change state. Okay, so we need to be able to answer why this answer is incorrect. What's wrong with this? Doesn't it make sense? So I'll be honest, guys, right? On the surface of it, this answer, I think, looks the most sensible out of all the questions we've looked at so far, right? It looks like it makes sense. It seems really well answered. It's got lots of key points in there, and it seems really well explained, right? If you follow the explanation, it seems to make sense. The ice melts, the energy supplied causes the particles to move faster, increasing their kinetic energy. This is why the particles are able to break free from each other and change state. So what's the mistake here? What did the student do wrong? Well, it's this term here where they say that the kinetic energy is what is increased, okay? So the key point in the question is that it says the temperature remains constant throughout. Okay, now if the temperature remains constant, then we need to be able to know that kinetic energy of particles and their temperature is directly linked. Okay, so we should be able to know that temperature is directly linked to the kinetic energy of particles. So if you were to increase the kinetic energy of any of the particles, if you increase the average kinetic energy of them, then basically the temperature would also increase. But we know here the temperature stays constant. Okay, this is a phase change, right? It's at its melting point, and hopefully you guys are familiar with all the curves. When you have latent heat of fusion or vaporization, the temperature doesn't change. You see a flat line on your graph, and basically what's going on is the excess energy is not actually going into the kinetic energy of the particles to increase the temperature, is going into the potential energy instead. Okay, so remember, internal energy of any substance is made of potential energy and kinetic energy. And therefore, when you supply heat to something, either you can increase the kinetic energy or the potential energy. And when you're undergoing a phase change, you actually input heat to increase the potential energy and not the kinetic energy. And that's why the temperature remains constant. Okay, so if we were to answer this question, you only really need to make a small tweak here, where you just say that the energy supplied doesn't cause the particles to move faster or increase their kinetic energy. It actually increases the particles' potential energy, and that gives them the energy to break free and change state. Okay, so it seems really sensible the way the student has written this down, but actually it's not quite correct. And let's have a look then at the model answer that is going to be written down for us in the sheet. So question 4, claiming that kinetic energy increases during melting. So remember, just like we said, that was a mistake. That is at constant temperature. And so why does this lose marks? Well, basically, just like we mentioned, the question says that the temperature remains constant. And remember, temperature is a direct measure of average particle kinetic energy. Okay, so as long as you remember that, you'll definitely get this question right. And therefore, what should we have said for the correct answer? During melting, temperature stays constant, so the kinetic energy of the particles does not change. The energy supplied is used to break the bonds between particles, increasing their potential energy store as they move further apart. Okay, and if you want even more detail, you can see basically the answer in blue, basically what the mistake was, and the idea that the latent heat of fusion is used exclusively to overcome intermolecular attractive forces, and so on and so forth. Okay, so the blue one, definitely you'll get all the marks, but even if you just said the green one, I think this is the one you guys should be aiming for, you would get the marks here. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully this worksheet is somewhat useful to you guys. There are worksheets for all of the GCSE topics, and I'll leave a link in the description for them below. I definitely do recommend it. It's a different way to revise, right? Normally you guys will just read your notes, you might do some questions, but this is, again, different to doing questions, right? You're actually actively having to become the examiner and look at why a question is wrong, an answer is wrong. Okay, so hopefully that was useful, and I'll see you guys in the next one. So hopefully that was useful, and yeah, check out the worksheets in the description below.